welcome back to Psychedelics Today. John Moore here. We're joined by Dr. Dave Rabin and Jeremy Falk. We're here talking about the Comma Flight program, which I found out about recently, and I find it super interesting and excited to dig in. So, Jeremy, can you give us a little bit of a high level on who you are and also like what is Comma Flight?
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having us. Comma Flight is a dynamic dance that is a combination of Acroyoga, Thai massage, and contact improv. It is a partner wellness modality, and it's really an experience of collaboration, communication, leadership, receptivity, surrender, strength, and a whole lot of dynamics between two partners. One is the base, who is leading, the other is the voyager, who is being flown and receiving. And there are a lot of elements about this practice that help us build relational intelligence and connectivity to ourselves and to others. Some of the dynamics that I love are that the base is leading the dance, but also leading with a sense of listening to what their partner needs as they're moving their partner's body around the table. And the voyager is receiving, yet also communicating back into the dialogue about what they need and where they're going. If you haven't seen it before, it's essentially two people that are moving around on a massage table, and the base is stretching and leaning back and guiding the voyager by giving leg stretches, arm stretches, twisting. Some of our move names are tango. You can get a sense of spinning and rising up, and it's an exhilarating dance. I think even being on the massage table a little bit off the ground adds some of this daring dynamism to it. So that's a high level of this practice. It's really beautiful. I became involved with it 2 years ago. Our founder, Roland Peralta, has been creating this and sharing this for the last 15 years, mostly privately, and really as an artistic performance, as a partner experience, really this lyrical dance. And about 2 years ago, he decided he really wanted to more formally share it with the world and share its gifts with the world. So he started holding retreats at a beautiful venue called Chosen in Sebastian, Florida. Shout out to Tony and Jimena, amazing hosts doing incredible regenerative work, both on land and in cities. And when Roland led this first retreat, it was initially a bunch of attendees and guests and communities that had gathered, and I was one of the people, and I saw an opportunity to help Roland deconstruct this and teach this. At that time, it was being taught a little bit like a dance, as it is. And my background, I've been working in wellness as a teacher, educator, and facilitator for close to 20 years, and extensively a lot in yoga. So I have a long yoga background, and I lead yoga teacher trainings as well, and particularly in sequencing. So I saw an opportunity where I could help Roland codify, structure, name some of these moves, slow it down, teach it step by step, have progressive workshops instead of just sort of, you can imagine an advanced tango class. They go, look at us. You really got to go, okay, my right foot goes here, my left hand goes here. And so I started to break it down in that way. And as a teacher and a facilitator, I then started to lead the retreats that we were starting to bring this and share this with the world. Since then, it's been an amazing journey, heading learning and development and writing the digital manual and the course, the training manual that now we've brought to life to train our first batch of teachers. And yeah, it's an incredible practice, and there's a lot more to say about it.
Outstanding. And Dr. Dave Rabin, we know you from Apollo Neuro and a few other things, but excited to have you here as well. Can you give people a little bit of your background and how you're involved in Comma Flight?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Dave Rabin. I am a board certified psychiatrist and neuroscientist. Spent a lot of my time treating and researching trauma and addiction, particularly in folks who really struggle with typical Western medical treatments for these conditions. And I'm one of the few psychiatrists nationwide that's trained in both ketamine and MDMA assisted therapy. I'm an active ketamine practitioner and the chief medical officer of Apollo Neuroscience, which you see me wearing here, which is a way to, similar to Kama Flight, it's a way to use physical sensation, what we call like somatic experience of getting centered in your mind back into your body, which is always present. Our minds can be anywhere, to induce states of calm and healing. And I'm also the executive director of the Board of Medicine, which is a nonprofit medical board that helps to get these technologies integrated into Western medicine more effectively. My role with Kama Flight is really more of an advisory role because I'm just fascinated by the practice. I use movement therapeutically a lot with my clients, and I see the power of not just somatic techniques, somatic meaning in the body, but movement as a control opportunity for people to retake control over their bodies. Because, whether we realize it or not, we can move our bodies in any moment, right? By choice. And we often forget that that's a way to restore a sense of control and agency over ourselves. And so I witnessed Kama Flight, and I've seen similar practices for many years, but witnessed Kama Flight this past year and was blown away by how beautiful and effective the experience was. And I experienced it myself and found it really incredible. And I think it really builds on this interesting understanding in therapy and trauma healing, which is around trust. And the idea that when you're in a dance, as you were saying, Jeremy, you have to trust your partner who's leading. And when you're in therapy, you have to trust your therapist, because trauma, the essence of trauma is a fractured sense of self-trust, as Gabor Mate says. And so if your sense of trust in yourself is broken, you don't believe you can keep yourself safe, then through dance, through therapy, through body somatic exercises, through Kama Flight, it's this idea of trust modeling, where if I can get to a point where I don't remember what it feels like to trust myself, but I can trust this other person to guide me through this practice, then I can remember what it feels like to trust someone else, and I can remember what trust feels like, and then I can start to retrain my memory and ability to trust myself again. And I think that's where a lot of these techniques are heavily rooted, and why they're so effective, and why Kama Flight is so cool.
Love that. Thank you. And this is, I think, an important and timely conversation, because there's been some blowback in psychedelic land around touch. And I think that's a grave error, especially the way people are talking about it. And certainly not enough discussion on movement. And I think a practice like this, especially with a partner who one trusts, I think is an amazing thing, complementary to psychedelic therapy. But I'm kind of curious, Jeremy, about what kind of, I guess, internal movement have you seen by teaching people this kind of stuff? Have you seen people in interesting growth spaces as a result of this process at all, or what have you observed?
I think a lot of the parallels that we'll discuss around psychedelics and Kama Flight have to do with this rewiring and this repatterning, like Dr. Rabin was just sharing. And for the voyager to develop that sense of trust, for the base to gain a little more confidence to lead, to restructure the way that they lead. We have groups of people that come together as singles who are just meeting for the first time. We have partners, who've been together short-term, long-term, etc. And I think some of the big dynamics that we've seen in change and transformation and rewiring for a lot of the voyagers is this sense of being able to let go, which is not easy. And especially in our world, we have so much to do and we're always holding on and working harder. So this sense of letting go, this relaxation and this surrender is one of the big movements we've seen internally with voyagers. And like, that sense of trust, again, the base is really rewiring how to guide in a way that can be both like firm and gentle, that can be directive and sensitive. We have so much modeling around our leadership and heroes, if you just want to go for like heroes of conquering and force and brute dictators and all of this to establish new patterns of leadership where you can have strength, but also a sensitivity to be tuning in and listening to what your partner needs. You know, if you're in the dance and you're leading as the bass, and you move into a stretch and you feel the voyager let out a deep breath or exhale, that's a cue to you. This is a good moment to let it linger, to be there for a moment with your voyager. Likewise, or conversely, if you move into a stretch or something and you feel tension in the voyager's body or a shortness of breath, that's a signal to the base that perhaps they're not comfortable. That's either a moment to check in, which we encourage lots and lots of check-ins. It's part of the procedures I've built around this practice. Either check in or just restart. Have a moment to talk about that. Hey, what came up? I noticed, tension, anything you want to share, and just really encouraging that kind of communication as much as we can openly with people. There are 4 principles that are guiding this practice that were developed. And the first one, the first 2 are permission and presence. Permission is and Dr. Rabin will speak more to this, permission is the state of moving towards. It's creating, I like to just call it creating a safe space and container for your partner to say yes, to lean in. We're either leaning in or away from something. And so permission is through communication, through consent, through dialogue, through the slowness and the gentleness and the confidence of our movement, creating the condition for your partner to say yes. That's not just the voyager who's receiving, but also what comes up a lot is the base. When you're learning this, it's so challenging because like everyone gets in their head around, am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? Especially in a workshop or class, you're seeing other people, oh, I'm not doing it as good or strong or, beautiful as they are. And so the voyager is helping the base feel comfortable to learn something new and to be a little messy in that process. The second principle is presence, which is just inviting a mindfulness to let this be a moving meditation, to make sure that we do our best to free the clutter of our mind before we come to the table, and to just be here with our breath, body, and partner. The following 2 principles are polarity and play. So polarity is suggesting that 2 things are not in the same place at the same time. There's a push-pull dynamic that is happening at all times. And even though the base is leading, it doesn't mean that the base is always pushing or pulling. It's this collaboration back and forth, like we were saying, and that there are 2 clear roles to occupy. One of the great benefits of this practice is not just having people occupy a base or voyager, but switching. So we always switch as much as we can, especially early on. Partners who are able to then do the opposite. If you were just being flown, the opportunity to now fly or stretch somebody is helping to create that understanding of, oh, this is what it's like for them, and to understand the roles that are at play. And play is the last principle. Play being a sense of creativity, joy, expression, to let it be offered in a good way. But also, when we first learn something, it can be really heady and tricky, and we're really in our mind. And eventually it becomes embodied and meditative. And in that way, we get to experience more creation, more spontaneous arising and improv.
I wanted to, as soon as you started going, I wanted to ask about the attitude going in, if it was going to be playful or serious, because you can see like really serious tango people, or you can see really playful tango people. It's a good analogy, I think. And
I would say
another thing
Kama Flight seems much more playful than tango. It has like tango influence, but you're right. Like there's a huge spectrum of dance, whereas like there's competitive, very serious, you do the specific moves kind of dance, and if you don't do the moves, you're going to get a glare from your partner. And then this is like correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, but for the most part, the partner, one person's back is to the other person's front, right? So you're not actually facing each other that much of the time. And so yeah. So the feedback is very felt feedback. It's not like eye to eye, like you can see somebody judging you feedback. It's like very like open, like permissive, kind of go with the flow feedback.
There is a mix too. There are moments when you do the tango, you spin your partner to face you. We have another move, superhero. One time you're lifting them up where the voyager is facing away. Another time they're facing down. So you do get those moments. But to that point too, I think some of the best moments that arise in the playfulness is when people just mess up and they have to drop, or something doesn't go as planned, and it's usually just it's a giggle, it's a sense of laughter. It's not a dance performance that's being judged in any way. And so yes, it can be really beautiful, sexy, elegant, all of these things. And when it's a little messy and real and people are just kind of clunky and learning something new, the laughter that arises from it is, I think, one of the best medicines also. And that's adding to the surrender, relaxation, and comfort.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to Stephen Kotler's book. I think it was Nar Country. It was about like aging and flow states. And this seems like a really cool tool to engage in that. Like as we're over 30 or 40 or 50, like we should be engaging in things that are novel to our body and safer. Like it seems a lot safer than what he was suggesting, which is really aggressive, like skiing or skateboarding or something. And I think that's really cool to have this. And, you know, thinking about priming the nervous system before a psychedelic experience through a few of these sessions seems really smart, especially if somebody's like perhaps has a traumatized or underdeveloped facility for movement and proprioception. Dr. Rabin, anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we're all familiar here with The Body Keeps the Score, right? Bessel van der Kolk's work, which I think was really seminal in the trauma space. And I think like what we're really talking about is, in terms of the role of the body in mental health, is that our body stores stuff that is in the form of tension, right? Like tenseness, that feels a lot like anxiety or restlessness when we've experienced trauma or stress that is not processed. And we have these different ways for processing it, right? Movement, humor, laughter, awe-inspiring experiences, connecting with nature, connecting with each other, right? Journaling, writing, talking, singing, creativity. There are all these different outlets with which we can use that we've known about forever, right? They're part of human experience, but we've known about them forever in terms of ways that you can take tension that's stored in the body and get it out into something that's outside of the body, no longer stuck. And what these somatic techniques like Kama Flight are really interesting for, in particular, is this idea of what Sigmund Freud called sublimating energy, right? So sublimation is this concept of taking something that feels relatively unpleasant to us on the inside and then translating it into, or transmuting it into, something that then has like kind of like a pleasant or productive outcome. And so tension from past stress or trauma being translated through the safety of a consensual relationship with another human being that's safe into movement is literally like a facilitation of energy transfer, right? And it's like literally taking, the way that I think about it is, and I think is really cool in terms of the way we think about somatic techniques at large, but Kama Flight is a great example of this. Is it's a way to literally take, this 100+ year old Freudian theory of sublimation combined with like the body keeps the score, combined with, yogic movement practices, Acroyoga, things like that, and then actually create a practical real world application whereby we're solving a lot of problems for people that are stuck, right? The word we use is stuckness. And people like they can't progress forward in their healing journey in their lives. They feel like they're not able to transition to achieve their goals to the next stage of their life, let go of the past, let go of regrets, whatever it is, right? Create stuckness. And so this is a way to alleviate stuckness by safely facilitating the movement of stuck energy in the body. And that's really cool. And the permission part that Jeremy was talking about is absolutely critical, because I think that goes to what you were mentioning, Joe, about kind of this difference between MDMA or, when touch in the psychedelic setting versus touch outside of the psychedelic setting, and how, psychedelic therapy is also about moving energy. And the challenge is that in the psychedelic setting, if you are being asked to consent to touch with a partner, with a therapist, and you're already altered, then you are going to be more permissive and not necessarily aligned with your goals starting out. You might be more disinhibited. You might be more suggestible. And we don't want that, because whether there's a psychedelic involved or whether there's no psychedelic involved, that's what leads to abuses in therapy. All the abuses, the kinds of abuses we see in the psychedelic space were abuses that happened before psychedelics were introduced, and they were happening without psychedelics in the clinical and therapy world. So that's not new, right? But what is important is permission and consent. And when we establish that relationship with a client in advance when they're sober and say, hey, what are you comfortable with, right? And then you take them through like a Common Flight experience sober. And they're like, does this feel comfortable to you? Does it feel safe to you? And you kind of like establish some ground rules, some boundaries, some, a comfort level. Then all of a sudden that becomes a powerful asset in the psychedelic state as well, because they already identify it as familiar and safe. And it creates new patterns for energy transfer and movement, which is, core to healing.
Yeah, I love that. Jeremy?
To add on just to the safety, some of the protocols that we've built into this practice that I've added, really has a lot to do with communication. So before anyone comes to a workshop, we really tried to be as explicit as we can, that just says participants should be comfortable giving and receiving touch and sitting closely with another person on a massage table. This isn't like level 1 touch. If a hand on your shoulder is a triggering traumatic response for you, it's not the place yet. So you got to stay in your lane and know what you're doing. But this is for people who are comfortable with some degree of touch, to be as explicit as we can on the outset before you come into the container, so there's no surprises. And then we also have something called the no-fly zones. So inherently built in, we have places where your hands and feet will never touch on the body. This is basically around the groin and the buttocks and around the breast and the chest. So at no point. And we also ask when people are on the table, because we'll have long-term couples and people that are just meeting for the first time, we ask that everybody maintains the same level of touch and intimacy, because it is an intimate practice. It is sensual. That's part of the beauty of it, that it can rewire and let us drop into that space. But we also just want it to be comfortable for everyone. So we ask that long-term couples don't start rolling around on the table and making out in a way that people who are just meeting might be a little off-put by. So everyone's observing sort of the same conduct with the touch. And then from the no-fly zones, before we begin, we have what's called the trust talk. And the trust talk is a simple question. Is there anything you would like me to know about you or your body today? And before two partners fly, they're always going to have that brief check-in. Sometimes it may be, nope, I'm good, let's go. And sometimes it may be, I have certain areas of the body outside the no-fly zones I'd prefer if you didn't touch. Okay. I have injuries, same things you would disclose to a massage therapist. It could be energetic and intentional. I've had a really stressed day. I need to get out of my head. Or I've actually had a lot of movement. I need to be slow and gentle today. So that initial question in the trust talk helps to set the frame. And then there's an agreement going forward that the partners will continue to check in with each other again and again and again during the practice. The base often leads that by just saying, how's this feel? How's this touch? If the voyager responds, great, good, they keep going. If something is off, they'll reset, talk about it. And so we really encourage that kind of communication. And then after that touch, or after that talk, before partners begin and after, we always, always, always begin Kama Flight with 2 deep breaths. Why 2? I think because you can rush 1. And if it's something you have to do, you're like, okay, let's go. But the second one really brings you into a slower space. And even when we're doing instructional workshop style teaching, and I've just shown a move, or a teacher's just shown a move, and they do it, okay, we're going to do that one more time. We don't go right back into it. If it's 5 times in a row we're demoing a move, every single one of those times we're going to begin with 2 deep breaths. And just make sure that we have that chance to slow down. So all of these are built in to help create that container of safety and trust.
I love this as like a practice potentially before and after these psychedelic sessions, because of this practicing of consent and consent language, and modeling it through a tight framework, that is safe and supervised, and you're not, alone in a room with one other person, right? Where there could be a larger sense of unsafety. There are people where this is going to be challenging, obviously, but I would suggest that those people where it's going to be challenging, like that this is potentially a really good growth area to investigate if they can get feeling safe enough to try it. Um, I've been having a lot of conversations outside of the psychedelic therapy space, more in like the kind of burner culture, like how do we do consent properly? I know folks in the Bay have been at this for a long time, but the rest of the country's a little behind. And we've got to, really, really learn and share and figure this stuff out. And I love how you were talking about it, Jeremy, and like, let's pause and check in and go, okay, like, what do we do next? And yeah, that's great.
Well, and I think, can I add one thing to that, Joe?
Please.
The one quick thing I'll add is that how this ties into the new psychiatry, like the modern way that mental health treatment is going in the 21st century, which is inclusive of psychedelic assisted therapy, is that safety, patient safety, client safety is not optional for healing, right? Like, I think in the past, we looked at psychiatry as, I'm the doctor, you're the patient, you come to me, I tell you what to do, you do it, you go home, you do it. If you don't do it, shame on you, right? That is not the way that modern psychiatry is moving. That way, the old way doesn't work very well. It works in 50% or less of our patients. The new way is built on really more of the ancient sentiments around healing, which come from Hippocrates, Maimonides, ancient Eastern tribal cultures. And, it's really around trust and safety, in that if you don't trust your provider, if you don't trust your partner, if you don't trust your dance partner, right, how good are you going to be at being present in participating in this activity if half of your brain or more is spent thinking about, or am I safe right now, right? And we know this with psychedelics. If people feel unsafe going into a psychedelic experience in any way, the chance of them having a challenging, or what many people call a bad trip, goes through the roof, right? Like exponentially higher if you feel unsafe coming in. And so I think what's really exciting about this kind of work, and how we rethink the role of the body in mental healing and emotional healing, is starting with, how do we ground people in a sense of safety in the body as a foundation of trust and a place for the mind to safely relax and let go into the experience, and just to be fully present and lean into the experience. And that is not optional. To get those outcomes we're talking about, to get the outcomes we see in these psychedelic assisted therapy trials that are just life-changing outcomes, people have to feel safe. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. And practicing these things outside of psychedelic sessions, like that's where anxieties and risks can be the highest. But in a sober kind of partner container with supervision, there's a lot of room for safety. Yeah.
And that's why we start with preparation, right? That's why we talk about this kind of stuff, like prepare before your psychedelic experiences. But many other people are like, oh, I'm just going to go drop whatever drug it is tomorrow, right? I have a day off, and they don't really think about the environment. I know so many people who are even expert providers who have made the mistake of accidentally taking a psychedelic drug because they're so overly familiar with it in a situation that turns out to be unsafe for them, and then cause long-term complications, right? And so I think a lot of it is this understanding also of preparation and intention setting. Why am I doing this is important, right? And then that goes hand in hand with integration, which is the post-experience continuation, right? Like, how do I take what I learned from this powerful experience, whether it's with comma and movement, or whether it's with a psychedelic medicine? How do I take what I learned and then integrate it and process it into a continued, renewed sense of self? How do I make use of these learnings, right? And not just have it be a one-off experience and then I just go right back to where I was before I started.
I'm kind of curious about the neuroscience here around like exploring new ranges of motion in novel ways with somebody else, and what that might be doing to the nervous system from a neuroscience perspective.
I mean, I think it's doing a lot. It does a lot, right? I mean, like, this is the fundamental science of touch, of soothing touch and movement. And it does a lot. I think so it's hard to get into all of it, but I think suffice to say, probably one of the most important pieces of our nervous system that gets activated in these experiences is that vagus nerve, that parasympathetic uh, dominant nerve that is a cranial nerve 10 that starts in your brainstem and goes throughout your entire body and basically slows the body down and enhances recovery. So it slows heart rate, it slows blood pressure, the vagus nerve, increases digestion, increases recovery, sleep, um, you know, metabolism, regulates immunity, reproduction, all of the things, the functions of the body that we want to happen when we are not actively running from a lion is vagus nerve. And so the vagus nerve is interesting because it's triggered by safety, right? Safety, soothing sensations. Soothing sensations could be getting your hand held by a loved one, an embrace from a loved one or a person you trust, eye-to-eye contact from a loved one or a pet, hearing your favorite song, smelling your mom's chicken soup, right? Any of those things will boost vagal tone. And so I think when you look at what happens in the brain when vagus nerve activity is increased, it is an overall shift away from all the centers of the brain and the body that are involved in fight or flight, and a reallocation of resources back to recovery. So it's a massive shift from just really stimulating one nervous system pathway, which is that vagus nerve parasympathetic pathway. You induce this massive shift starting in what we call the hypothalamo-pituitary axis, the HPA axis, which is that governs fight or flight and rest and digest nervous system activity, that then says, hey, body, you're safe enough to recover and heal right now. You don't need to worry about being in danger. And I think when you look at how movement, the biggest impact that movement has, it's on that system. There's lots of other stuff going on a micro level, but that's kind of what is happening on the macro neuroscience level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. And Jeremy, how do you? And
that's how Apollo works as well.
Yeah, right on. And Jeremy, how do you like to think about this part?
Well, I think, there's Dr. Rabin said so much and so well. I think there really is this element of dropping into the meditative state, out of the narrative network and into the direct experience network, that is helping us to really become a little more aware of our experience. And from the somatic standpoint, things that are buried in the body, things that we've gone through, they may surface. We may get sensations, memories that come up. We may have a chance to alchemize, to work with, or simply just to observe things that have been in the body when the mind is able to go into that relaxed, meditative, safe space. And really in a different way with a partner than modalities that you would do on your own, like a solo yoga practice or something, because so much of what can be in the body may be the result of interactions between two people, that ingredient will then help to unlock something to be processed and worked with too.
Yeah. The way I model it for yoga is often we just get like so calm with like nice proprioception and movement awareness that things finally have a moment to breathe and process. And it's like a really gentle way of putting it. But like, I think when we add movement and partners and things like that, there's something extra going on, which I really appreciate. Especially with that like sense of novelty and like light risk, but safe risk.
Yeah. This light risk and safe risk, we aim to create an environment that is low pressure, high trust, and fun, just to speak to that. And also, there is so much benefit in the partner switching. We really do encourage it. So we talk about pole switching. So if you're a base, let somebody fly you. If you're the voyager, turn around and fly and work with somebody else. There are naturally, physical requirements for the strength to move a person's body into the air, but a lot of the sequences you can do, most bodies sitting together and moving around. So the pole switching, but also working with different people, it really just helps to unlock not just proficiency in the practice where you can understand moves and bodies better, but things within your own body and awareness each time. We, of course, don't require anybody to switch, and we want everyone to maintain, if they came with somebody, to come with somebody and stay that way. But we encourage it. We really open the door, because the more people you are comfortable working with, the more information you're going to receive, and the more information that may arise somatically and neurologically too.
That's really, really good. I wonder if you can speak to any kind of results you've seen over time with people who have been doing this for any extended period of time.
Mm. Oh, well, I think in couples, including my partner and I, when we first did this, really helped to iron out and bring to light some of the dynamics in our relationship. You know, I think any good modality, especially an embodied modality, but any good modality will reflect life back to you, whether it's dance or karate or Pilates or really anything. If you're watching with an awareness, you'll start to notice through the movement, through the body, patterns that you are playing out in your own life. And so couples will start to bring awareness to their own communication habits and patterns. I've seen and I've felt a shift in what I would say. I start out really tuning in and listening a lot and leading very little, to coming and calibrating a balance where I'm actually leading more with a little more confidence and keeping the right amount of listening that feels more sustainable, and also what my partner wants to feel, and my partner wants to feel me lead in that way. So I've seen base partners shift the way they think about leading, and many of the voyagers in the experience, they feel pleasure again. They feel safety and relaxation, a softening from, whether you're male, female, or any gender or anything in between. We have so much on our plate in the modern world to be in the sort of logical, more is it left brain or right brain, Dr. Raven?
I don't know. We're getting away from those left brain, right brain
Okay,
sections,
fair.
but the
Fair.
point, but the point taken that more logical, rational brain versus creative, free
And
artsy
the
brain.
modern world demands a lot of that, save for a few artists and creatives who maybe spend a lot of their time in the other. But it helps to unlock for people a chance to be in a more playful, creative, and intuitive space as well.
And Dr. Rabin, I'm curious about this concept of there being more than one nervous system at play here, and kind of like cross-human regulation, or is there something going on there that's that we understand at any point yet?
More than one nervous system, meaning between people.
There's two bodies in play.
Yeah.
And like potentially more even in the room, right? Like if it's like a larger class or something.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think this has become an area, so this is an area of Eastern and tribal medicine practice, the human to human interaction that has been well understood intuitively and well documented for thousands of years, but it wasn't really explored in Western science very well until the last 20 or 30 years. Some of the most interesting work comes from EEG syncing, so like brainwave syncing studies, some of which were done by the folks who run Emotive, which is a really cool EEG headset that we've used quite a bit in our clinical research. And what they do is they take two people facing each other with the EEG headsets on, and they just make eye contact. And within a very small amount of time, it's like sometimes less than a minute, sometimes it's 5 minutes, but it's less than 20 minutes, that just by making eye to eye contact, your brainwaves sync with the other person. And, we know that eye to eye contact's important, right? We know that we feel more connected to each other with eye to eye contact. We also, just as one example of intimacy between humans, right? Eye to eye contact is one example, touch is another example. But eye contact is one that we don't get as much anymore, like touch, because we're heads down on our phones all the time, right? And so, I think it goes without saying that there's a dynamic interaction at play between our bodies all the time. And it's really just about, I think, going back to what Jeremy was saying earlier, this balance between listening, being in a listening state of mind and a doing state of mind. And is that when we're always doing stuff, we are taking resources away from the listening piece. And then we're not aware of how we're impacted by others. And we're not aware of how we're impacting other people because we're not listening. And when you put yourself in a situation like Comma Flight as an interesting example, where you're forced to do and then forced to listen and you switch, right? It shows you this clear juxtaposition of, this is what my body feels like in a passive listening state, and this is what my body feels like in a active doing state, and then this is the in between, right? And so you get to see the difference in the way that your body responds and how you feel when you're doing versus listening, and then the balance between. And I think that it's fascinating, and we know that it results in the downstream release, like that kind of touch, that kind of eye-to-eye contact in safe environments results in the release of all the healthy downstream hormones that everybody takes drugs to get if they don't get them naturally, right? It's like the dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, norepinephrine, endocannabinoids, endogenous opioids, our natural pain-relieving molecules, endorphins, all the good stuff comes out, oxytocin, all the good stuff comes out when we have these natural human-to-human, authentic, non-judgmental bonding experiences.
Mm. That makes sense.
Joe,
Jeremy?
to add one last little piece too around what I see and those benefits, I think it's been amazing how many times after 5 minutes on the table, somebody gets off and just says, wow, I feel completely reset. And it doesn't even take long. Sessions are typically between 5 and 15 minutes, but even just 5 minutes without even doing the more technical, complex lifts and spins, just the circular movements with the loving touch and some gentle stretches, 5 minutes and people just feel completely reset. Roland always had a vision that this would be a place that people could come to after work, after a long day, to be flown or to fly and to help get out of their heads. And I think we've seen that a lot. And I love this idea and the application in the medicine space and the psychedelic space as a way to prepare people to be a little more relaxed and receptive before taking their journey too.
Yeah, I love that. And, that's a cool aspiration, because the default right now is parents having some drinks when they get home from work or something. And, the new data, it's not really all that new, but alcohol and cancer link is pretty robust. And, people want different ways of connecting. Like alcohol is kind of a little dated at this point, a few thousand years out of date. And like, how do we do what's new and follows the science? And like, this sounds
a way to check in and not check out.
Yeah. And, reset your body, and then you can go be with your family when you get home from work, in a nice, more holistic way. Yeah, I love that. Anything else we should cover here that like we perhaps didn't hit? Or what's the program look like, Jeremy? Is there a training track? Are there workshops all over the place? Like, what does it look like now?
So it's an exciting year for Comma Flight. Last summer, I spent several months helping to writing our training manual, and we just finished our first official teacher training in December at the Chosen Retreat Center, and we now have 17 certified teachers. We have classes and workshops that are happening in San Francisco, Austin, New York City, and Miami, and soon more to come in a few other places as well. So if you're interested to participate and get involved in Comma Flight, if you're in one of those cities, by the way, Comma Flight PT is our 15% off code for listeners of the show who would like to sign up and check out the class schedule on the website. We also have an at-home course, a digital course that I authored last year too, that is 77 instructional videos that help people step by step. You need a massage table. We have one on our website that's the recommended height, weight, sturdiness, etc. And that's a great way for people to practice at home if they want to grab a table, have a table to work with somebody. And we also have a retreat coming up in Tulum that will be at the end of this January 25. If you're able to hear this and sign up. We have more retreats and teacher trainings coming up this year too.
Beautiful.
I have one more plug, the San Francisco workshop coming up on January 18th. So if this happens to get into people's ears before then, January 18th
At the portal, right?
At the portal where I'm sitting and recording this right now, which is a brand new, wonderful wellness community event biohacking space in Marin. I know Dr. Rabin is a member, myself included. I teach here as well. So we have one on January 18th. Dr. Rabin, hope to see you there.
Yeah, I'll do my best. We have a new little one in the family. My wife just gave birth last week, so we are to our first child. So we have our hands full. So if I can travel, I will be there.
Congratulations!
Thank you.
I totally get that. Big congratulations. My son is now almost 15 months, so I understand the hands full. I'm just getting a sense and feel for it myself.
Yeah, you get it. Yeah, I think the one thing I would add, just to this, because I think it's really important that we acknowledge is that pleasure in our society is often thought of as self-indulgent and forbidden, and I want to just put it out there that modern neuroscience shows that pleasure is healing, and we all deserve it. We all deserve to feel good. We all deserve to feel pleasure, and if it's the lack of pleasure in our lives that we subscribe to through whatever journal or religion or whatever it is that results in a lot of suffering for us. And that's avoidable by just doing things that invite activities that invite more pleasure into our lives and prioritizing those activities because they are not just okay, they are required for having a healthy, long life. And, when we look at, these blue zone cultures, people who live into their late 90s, early hundreds, these folks are feeling good a lot of the time. Their stress level's very low because they don't demonize pleasure. And, I think that's something, even though a lot of them smoke and a lot of them drink, they're still living longer because they are feeling good. Their stress levels on the whole are much lower. And so somatic activities, tools like Apollo, Comma Flight, these are all part of it. There's no one trick pony for healing. It's really about, having more tools in your toolbox, and your toolbox needs to have pleasure-based tools in that toolbox. And these tools like Comma Flight are really important because it helps to remind us of how important and natural pleasure is, and how natural and important pleasure is with accompaniment with another human being, right? Which is often something that that's a big contribution to the loneliness epidemic, right? It's just feeling separate from each other. When you can be there with somebody holding you who you don't really know, that you feel safe around, what could be more of an antidote to loneliness than that, right? It's just feeling connected to another human. And that's pleasure, and we deserve it. And so I want to make sure we all keep that in mind because it's so easily forgotten.
So well said. I really appreciate you dropping that here at the end. It is part of Comma Flight's mission to create a closer, more connected and vital world. And especially in the day and age where we are disconnected, even more from each other and bodies and other people, with touch, as things become more virtual and augmented and all of that, and artificial, the importance of just being with each other, connective, somatic, touching, creating that and feeling good, inviting the pleasure. Kama is the word for pleasure, in Sanskrit, and that is really it. It's a way to take flight with yourself and another, and I really appreciate you dropping that here because that's a part of the mission.
My pleasure. No pun intended.
Dad jokes already. You got dad jokes already. You're gonna be so good at this.
Well, thank you both for being here to talk about Comma Flight, neuroscience, and more. I hope people check it out. I want to check it out. And next time I'm in the Bay, Jeremy, I'll reach out to see if there's anything going on. Can't wait. And Miami Acro Week, is that happening for Comma? Yeah.
I think so.
Cool.
Right?
Folks,
I believe so. They were a big sponsor last year, so check it out. Lots happening in Miami. That's the hub right now as it starts to spread to these other cities.
All right. Until next time, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.